Today's readings invite us to become great in the sight of God by doing God's will as Jesus did, by surrendering our lives to Him and giving service to others. In this world where fame, power, and wealth count, Jesus is saying that it is not the way of the heavenly world. We have it backwards. Jesus is saying, if you want to be a leader, you need to be a servant of all. The apostles were still looking for the triumphant Messiah, the one who would conquer and reign. They wanted to be an important, as we heard in the gospel. Mark presents Jesus as giving 3 different predictions about his coming suffering and his death. So we hear it in Mark in chapter 8, 9, and 10, telling them 3 different times what was going to happen. But the response by Jesus' disciples to each of these were disappointing to him. The 3 refusals rose from the assumption that Jesus was going to be this great political, wealthy, powerful, military Messiah who would usher in an earthly kingdom where they as disciples would be rich and powerful because they were close and associated with Jesus. Jesus was telling them that they must be humble, serve like little, and be childlike in their faith. Jesus demonstrated this, of course, at the Last Supper by washing the disciples' feet. Each time Jesus tells his disciple, it was in 3 different patterns that he talked to them about. Jesus telling the apostles that he would suffer and die. And then they misunderstood what he was trying to tell them. And then Jesus tells them that to be a disciple, they must follow the way of the Master to the cross. Last Sunday, Peter resisted hearing what Jesus had to say, and Jesus rebuked him. And this Sunday, the apostles denial, and then they argued with each other which of them were the greatest. In the third denial, James and John asked to be on Jesus' right and left hand in his kingdom. Again, not understanding. We all show how far the disciples were from following Jesus in his passion footsteps. They were afraid of hearing the truth and denied it. To serve the powerless is the deepest meaning of the cross. The irony is that the one who becomes least must serve the least of all to become the first. The apostles didn't understand. You must be a servant to be a leader. Jesus is saying that is a secret, and he even showed it, as I mentioned, in the washing of their feet. The first reading is describing the reality that evil can't stand for good. And it was one of the suffering servant readings that we heard about, which we could think about Jesus as Christians, about them, and say, and the torture that Jesus received in the first reading. If we desired simply to be the servant and childlike in our simplicity, we would have no envy or conflict, and we will be able to rejoice with others at their good fortune. Even the second reading of James says that jealousy and strife comes from within us. Patience, understanding, forgiveness, and reconciliation leads to peace and joy. We hear that status has no place in the reign of God, and a disciple is called to serve. So how are we serving? How do we serve others at Mass? Or are we just spectators, or just come bodily and don't even think about what's happening at Mass? Do we give our full, active, and conscious participation by our singing, by our responses, and by our actions of standing, kneeling, and sitting to make the celebration of life, a changing experience for us in our lives as we leave church today? Do we see God as the audience, the one accepting our praise during this Mass? Or mistakenly see ourselves as the audience, watching others ministering to us? We are all called to be present to others, and liturgy, as we know, means the work of the people. Last Sunday, Jesus told us in the gospel to carry our crosses and deny ourselves. This week, he tells us to be like little children and depend on him. At the end of Mass, we will hear about our diocesan annual appeal and the ways that we can serve others through giving to this appeal. So let us ask God in this Eucharist today how we are to serve others in all the things that we do this week through our time, our talent, and our treasure.